Ingram Smith, Bud Elliott, back again for another episode of the Nolecast. So, Bud, looking back, we'll do a little bit of a review of the Clemson game, talk more just kind of broadly as to where you are 7 games in. Won your first 4, lost your next 3. Always good to get a nice little swing of emotions throughout the course of a college football season. Always want to thank Tarpon Cellars and Louisiana Hot Sauce, title sponsors of the Nolecast. TarponCellars.com is the website. Nolecast is 20% off on the coupon code. And Bud, let's just 2 guys, as you said, 2 guys that have done this for a while and followed this and covered this program for a decade and a half or so. And we'll give y'all our best ideas to what we've seen and maybe more importantly to y'all, what we're going to see over the next 5 games.
Yeah, man. Let's do this thing. So FSU sits at 4-3. I really didn't get a chance to weigh in on the Clemson game because you handled the instant beautifully, I thought. We are not a podcast that's going to yell and scream when something that we expect to happen happens. Unless there's something that you really could have done to avoid it. And mid-season, I don't really think there was much you could have done to avoid losing to Clemson. Now, you could have avoided maybe some of the things that happened in the game, potentially. But there are alternative ways that game could play out that maybe they don't sound quite as good, right? So who knows? Clemson's a better team than you are. They're better at most every position. I'm not really sure how many guys you have on this Knowles roster who would start for those guys. Maybe a couple, but not a whole lot.
And I'm not sure any of them are healthy right now, or at least 100%. So.
Like are they taking your receivers? I mean, Pittman might get some run there. If Wilson actually played big and caught the ball consistently, he might. But Jordan's not starting over DJ. They'd probably find a place for Rob Scott now that he's healthy. Gibbons, I think you could argue.
Verse and Lovett wouldn't start, but they'd be heavily in the rotation. And that's
if healthy, yeah,
quite a compliment for the other people that they have on that roster. But other than that, and no, at linebacker, you got 2 guys that would see snaps, but
and we like the linebackers.
We do,
but that's a different level of linebacker there. So I'm not really feeling bad, and obviously nobody in your secondary. We'll probably have to talk about that secondary coming up, but it's not new.
That was covered in the instant as well.
Yeah. But I saw a couple things I liked, right? You were able to run the football at times in that game when teams were playing you to prevent explosive plays, which is something that we discussed over the last few weeks, that because of how explosive play dependent you were, teams were going to try to play you more two deep looks and force you to run them out of it. And, to be honest, at times FSU was able to do so. And that's encouraging because I know Clemson is still working back through all these things. They're just getting all these new pieces back, and these guys are still kind of learning to play within that defense, et cetera, et cetera. I still like that you're able to kind of run on them a little bit. That's encouraging to me. So, bravo there. Yeah, so not a terrible performance, one that I think we kind of expected. And it's not one that should sink you. Hopefully that locker room didn't. You want them to have a belief they can win, but you don't want them to have such a belief that it's like, okay, now the season is toast because you didn't beat Clemson and now you're mathematically eliminated from winning the conference, basically, which you are at this point. So you just got to hope they can bounce back and that they realize that there are some realistic goals. And I know all these guys in the preseason were talking about going undefeated and making it to the playoff and all this stuff, which was never realistic. But a bowl game is a nice.
This year's Florida State team going undefeated.
Oh, on social media, yeah, all the kids. This is the same reason why you don't trust injury updates from kids, right? Because they don't seem to give accurate information a lot of times, right? This is a okay football team. When it's healthy, I think it's actually a pretty decent football team. When it's not healthy, it's just a straight ass average.
Yep. If you want to be optimistic, I think if this team's healthy, it's a top 18 to top 28 team in the country.
Yeah,
I think it's so. pretty darn good compared to what you've been over the past 2.5 years, right? So that's the real positive. There are some moments tonight where we're not going to be overly negative, but there's some interesting things to look at and some of the further ramifications of them. But Yeah, as the team improved, all those general kind of macro 30,000 foot issues. Yeah, there's also some some concerning things when you drill down and what ultimately that's going to mean. So, um, yeah, I'd rewatch the Clemson game. I don't really have a whole lot to add. It is what it is, and it was what it was. And what stood out to me, unfortunately, in the live watch, from a negative perspective, I didn't see much that kind of changed my mind as I watched parts of that for a second and third time. So,
I think that's fair. So we had a couple questions about why FSU's defense is all of a sudden bad in the red zone. And these are from our Patreon, patreon.com/Nolecast. If you guys want to hit those dudes up, check them out. Really appreciate y'all going over there, patreon.com/Nolecast. And man, this is not a new phenomenon. If somebody's telling you that all of a sudden this defense is just all of a sudden poor in the red zone, that's not accurate. They've actually been struggling in the red zone, and specifically in terms of allowing scoring opportunities to be converted into touchdowns for about 5 games now. Okay. That's something this is why we've been calling them for what, a month? The bend and break defense. If you guys have heard that term, that's what we mean. They're not bend but don't break. They're bend and break. They break. I think a lot of this, to be honest, is coaching. I don't think FSU's defensive coaching is very good right now, especially in the back end. You are pretty predictable in your coverages. You don't play zone well. You have to play a lot of man. You're trying to play a lot of two deep stuff to protect your corners, who I understand were not as healthy this preseason and continuing into the season somewhat as you had hoped. But man, I mean, this has been an issue for over a month now. You allow touchdowns at a very high rate. Part of that too is probably your defensive injuries up front, right? To where you're not able to body people in the red zone as much, but you don't pass guys off very well. You're not able to really play zone. You got to play man. You don't press well. Your technique's not good. I mean, we said this a couple weeks ago. I don't really think that the back end of this defense coaching staff, if Mike's going to make it here long term, I don't think these are the right guys for that, especially when you factor in the quality of recruiting that they're giving you with the quality of coaching that's being given right now, personally.
agree. I mean, I kind of soft played it in the instant because I don't think it's a great look to start talking about guys' job securities at 12:30 at night after a loss or something like that. But the results
You are
the
30 games
results.
in, though, to the regime.
Definitely.
But I
Yeah.
understand.
We're in complete agreement there. I don't want to waste people's time by saying, "Yep, I agree." I mean, it is what it is, and it's just the results aren't. Um, yeah, particularly in the back,
Like,
you're not developing. We've got a whole nother conversation there, but
we just accept that like we just say it like it's an accepted fact now that you can't play zone. What?
mm,
Why? How many other teams can't play zone? You can't play zone? Why? Is it a new scheme you're trying to install? What? That's crazy to me.
yeah, and it's simplistic talk, but when you can't play zone, you can't confuse anybody. I mean, playing man is
Right.
what it is, and there's a reason turnovers are partially luck. Turnovers are also created in the most part by confusion. Um, there's a reason why this team turns the other team over as less as unfrequent as they do, and
Well,
that is a
right.
large part of it.
And because how many difficult throws do they actually force teams to make? You have a lot of open throws in the underneath areas because they don't communicate very well, and because they're easily picked because it's fairly easy to anticipate what they're going to run. Now, they've been more aggressive in recent weeks, I will say, but not to much success. Part of that is the corners getting exposed, and part of that is probably also on the coaching. When I see the vast majority of the defensive secondary not be as good as it was last year, what should I do? Blame four players, or take a look at the guys who are in charge of coordinating them? To me, that answer is simple. We'll see if Mike Norvell agrees, but yeah, to your point on the turnovers, the other issue is it's creating confusion, but it's also how many tip balls do you pick off? Not many, because well, first of all, you got to tip them, but second of all, if a lot of times you have your back turned to the play because
Right.
you're playing a lot of man coverage. And look, if you play good man coverage, that's like the premier coverage to play. I'm not going to complain about a team that plays great man coverage, but if you're playing man coverage because you're not able to teach zone because you're not, you see where I'm going with this? I don't think that they're well coached on the back end, man. I really don't.
I don't think there's a whole lot of conversation. I mean, they're clearly not. You can look at what happens when other teams get into the red zone, and I know this is a belabored point at this point, but tell me one Clemson touchdown that's an effort for them. I mean, they walk in on a zone read, they get a very simple confusion, and nobody covers a tight end. They hit a flea flicker or whatever. You know, that's just a little bit of a schoolyard play. The first touchdown they score, everything's easy, and it's just stuff. It's tough. So you you tend to have things go south on defense in a like concentrated period of time, and you've had runs of 27 and 28 on you at this point, and it's it's very tough. So
We have some positivity coming though about the defense, I think later on in the show. So don't turn us off right now. I know that was kind of an opening negative thing. I'm just about done with this defensive coaching on the back end.
we were both legitimately excited about some of the offensive things that you can take from Clemson, about Jordan under center, and we mentioned in the preview that now it wasn't well that you might see the tight ends more frequently featured, and some of the double tight looks that they created and what that meant. Particularly, it was interesting to see Clemson continue to play like two high safeties and some of that stuff, and that certainly helped some of the success that you had in the run game. But a lot there that I think you can take away from and build on, and um, the optimism of the offense is somewhat balanced by some of the concern that I think you can take away from the defense, and at the same time acknowledge that just as we said in the first couple minutes, you know, a whole lot of talent on Clemson's roster, and that obviously has to be factored into to how you try to evaluate that. But defensively, still disappointing effort.
No doubt about it. All right. Something that's not disappointing is the legendary team. Chad and Shannon, 844 FSU loan. It's 844 FSU loan. They do a tremendous job getting you your home loan. I've used them twice. What do we have? 500 Nolecast members now? Or are we still, I think we're 400, right?
We're two more closer after this week,
Okay.
and we're two
That's
more
right.
after the week previous. So yeah, I mean, it just it's a slow burn with these guys, and that's beautiful. And it's a slow burn that is now contributing to Rising Spear. So another $500 contributed to our friends over there after another two loans closed. And credit to Chad and Shannon for one being exceptional at what they do and kind of stars of their industry, but also finding a way to channel their passion and success in business into what they care about. And Florida State football, if you follow either of them on social media, you find out pretty quickly that that's what those guys care about deeply. And kudos to them for creating a fantastic initiative to support that of what we all love. And while we're sitting here listening and doing the Nolecast.
Absolutely. Okay. So let's get into this other issue, which is that FSU is not really scoring all that well when it gets in the red zone. So FSU obviously points per scoring opportunity allowed 97th in the country. So don't like that. But FSU, on the other hand, points per its own scoring opportunity is 86th now through 7 games. And we see a lot of this stuff, and we see people say, hey, like FSU is winning the yards per play battle. That means they should have won the game. That is a component in winning a game. Yes, you want to win the yards per play battle. That means you are generally more efficient or more explosive than your opponent. But it is not the only component to winning a football game. And when I look at this, I'm seeing some consistent trends here. I mean, the first one, man, is that you don't have a kicker that you trust, and opponents seem to know that, and that's a real issue.
So, and I think you also saw this by some of the things Clemson did. And I'm not telling you that Clemson came into that game and said, "Hey, we're going to get run on, and Robert Scott's going to block our guys better in a manner that we think they can, etc." But this isn't just a Clemson issue. Defenses are not going to let you get over the top of them. There's a reason why Clemson was in a too high safety look and willing to experiment with how much success Florida State could establish on the run. And it is, and again, we're not being foolish here. Nobody's running into the huddle after kickoff and the defensive coordinator is telling them, just let Florida State gain 20 yards at a time. But what they are saying is don't let Florida State gain 68 yards. Nobody can get over the top on a defense. And you're not going to allow that if you're playing Florida State right now. You know they can't kick. So you want to just kind of absorb. You want to bend and not break. And you want to get them into predictive situations. So whether that be that you let them get down into the red zone and, well, 3 is more or less off the table. So then you try to turn it into red zone roulette and try to get them into a 4th down or 3rd down. You know this team can't run in predictive run situations. You know that it is exceptionally hesitant to try to run to the right side of its offensive line on what I would label, traditional run plays. There are I'm not discounting Florida State's offensive production by any means, but I am acknowledging that people are somewhat willing to let you have drives on them because they know that you're very much going to struggle to finish drives.
Correct. So there are a couple things I want to add to this. Through the first couple games, FSU, their offense was very explosive, but not super efficient. And I think teams just looked at this and they said, okay, to your point, we're not going to allow explosive plays. We will make them earn it. There are a couple reasons why we don't think FSU can earn it. Number one is that the offensive line / tight ends. I think you should lump the tight ends in there at this point because they're I think they're just as bad as the offensive line as a position group, probably worse. They don't block well. The offensive line, especially on the right side, Turrentine's a liability. Okay, Maurice Smith's just okay. Meach has been all right at times, but also at times an issue. And Scott's been hurt, and now he's back, which is very, very helpful, as you saw in the Clemson game. But FSU is still 97th in the country, I think, right? No, I wrote that down wrong. 121st in the nation in offensive line penalties against. So, and they are also 97th in stuff rate allowed, which is where a run goes for 2 or fewer yards, not including like all the goal line stuff. What that tells me is that if I limit your really explosive plays at FSU, you aren't good enough, you aren't disciplined enough, you aren't strong enough to avoid making that killer mistake that knocks a drive off schedule. Now, you may have a drive or two, like you had, to open up the game against Clemson, which they were fantastic. And I thought Clemson was caught off guard with some of the stuff FSU did. They clearly saved a little bit of that, in my opinion, and they broke it out. And I thought it was great. But if you're Clemson, maybe you get away from some of that too deep if you want. But I think you're still of the mindset, this team is not going to be able to consistently drive the ball on us without making some kind of killer mistake. Yep. And ultimately, you saw FSU make those killer mistakes because that's what they've done. That's what they've done.
Your first touchdown is from an explosive run play, and your second touchdown is on 4th and a crazy athletic ex-wrestler, I have to force that in, play where I still don't know how DJ Lundy ends up getting in the end zone, but I'm just going to attribute that to a wrestler's kind of gyroscope and a balance that's impressive. But that's where you are. I mean, you're a couple of inches away from another empty drive, and that's how you win the total yards battle. That's how you win some of the YPP battle and not have that translate over to the ultimate scoreboard.
Oh, and another thing, because the defense doesn't get any turnovers, okay, and because it allows drives pretty consistently, like the defense does not allow a lot of explosive plays at all. It's bend and break. If you start getting stops, I'll reinstitute the bend but don't break tag. But right now, this defense is bend and break. At the times that they do actually stop somebody, it is generally resulting in a punt after a couple of made first downs that is putting your offense in usually a bad position. Now, we talked last game against NC State about how the offense put the defense in a bad spot, and it did at times, right? However, FSU's average starting field position on the year is inside its own 30. That's not very good. They actually move the ball pretty well. It's where the average field position defended by the defense this year is in the top half of college football. It's not that bad. But your offense is consistently backed up, which is one of the reasons I think why their yards per play performance is so drastically different than their actual point performance, because they're getting a lot of open field to play with because you're starting so far back. But this is not an offense that I think is great in the compressed area because of some of the physicality issues. You get a little bit less space to play with, right? Jordan's not really a precise, accurate passer all the time. I feel like we're being too negative here. Like, this is still a good football team. We're looking at some of these things that I think you can improve some of this stuff potentially, right? You need Wilson to play big consistently. I liked what we saw with Jordan's legs against Clemson quite a bit, right? I thought Toa Philly's actually improving as a runner, which is nice. They called some stuff for Benson.
Blown away by what Toa Philly was able to do.
Yeah.
And very optimistic about what that kid continues to project moving forward. And yes, we're being negative here. I want to say, man, the second drive, you go 93 yards and score on Clemson's defense. Yeah. And that, it got a little dicey there at the end, and DJ Lundy pulled it out. Never in a million years would I have predicted, what was that, a 13-play, 93-yard drive, whatever it is. Right. It is incredibly impressive. And the second drive that's 92 yards or whatever, I don't put maybe as much stock in because of the game situation. But the second drive there, or the second touchdown scoring drive of the game, is remarkable and not something that I thought you had in your bag. So that's very impressive and needs to be noted.
100%. The other thing I'll point out here is that, while it's not technically garbage time, FSU's offense is like at its absolute peak when it's down 3 scores. They're really good at that point. And you could tell me that maybe it's a sense of urgency from them, or maybe the opponent's taking their foot off the gas. If not from a play calling standpoint, it is just kind of natural to ease off when you've been whipping somebody for the first 40 minutes of the game. And then all of a sudden, you kind of think you have it in hand. FSU makes some adjustments in the late third quarter, early fourth quarter, and they're able to score some more points. I think, I'm not saying they're cooking the books here, but I think there's an element of that towards fakery.
I mentioned this in the instant. It's there's somewhere in the Venn diagram of garbage time and still competitive football, but a little bit of a mental adjustment or whatever. It's just human nature. Look, when you're up 20 points and the other freaking 65% of the other team's fans have left, and the stadium, you just change the way you play a little bit. So I don't. This is not the hill that I want to die on, but I think it's it's just different, and I personally think that there's a rather clear set of of evidence that points to this over the past couple of over the past year and a half or so. But nonetheless, if there is reason for optimism, and there is reason for optimism, one, you just played your 3 toughest games. 2, this is the stretch of the season that even in the preview series we talked about, if you're going to be successful, this is where you ultimately going to make some of your hay. Fabian is back at practice. I mean, you can see that. That's clear. That is a guy that, by all accounts, is going to be ready for the Georgia Tech game. It appears, and if not Georgia Tech, certainly Miami. You'd have to think that. Your wide receiver from West Virginia, Wright, appears to be practicing at a level that he has not previously. And again, if it's not Georgia Tech, I think that's probably Miami. Now, I have some concern working a wide receiver back into rotation and relationship with Jordan and all these things that haven't occurred because of that injury. But that's still significant to get if you can get him back. And it certainly looks like he's more involved in a more active participant in practice. That's significant. Those are 2 real big additions. And obviously Fabian is kind of what this whole defense is, I don't want to say built around, but certainly the starting point of it, and can have as large of an impact on the overall level of play of the other 10 guys as anybody on that unit.
100% agree. And look, you're right. The defense is not built around Fabian Lovett. It is a lot better if you have multiple quality interior players. And think about all the guys in this defense who've been banged up. And Malcolm Ray and Farmer, and even though I don't think he's very good, Jackson has been dinged, right? Like, I don't think Jackson's that great, but he's not terrible all the time, and he's definitely been hurt. So you get Verse another week to heal up here. I want to see what Robert Scott does as he gets healthier. Maybe Meach gets a little bit healthier on the offensive line. Jordan continuing to get some treatment, right? There's a lot of guys who I think battled to come back for this 3-game stretch, and we're not fully healthy for it. And I think you saw that. This is what we worried about after that heroic win against Louisville. Like, but man, like that's a great win, but you got a lot of dudes who got pretty banged up in that game. 4-3 is a real possibility. Get to shelter, get to the bye week, come back out. And to your point about Lovett, I think this is important for us to discuss. You got a lot of teams coming up that do not throw the ball very well. You have some teams coming up that if you play this style, which we don't like very much right now, but maybe it's their best style to play, of this really soft stuff, and you sort of dare opponents to be accurate underneath on you, there is some chance that these opponents, which are a little more on your level and not on that kind of Clemson Wake offensive level, don't do it, or don't do it consistently, or I don't have a whole lot of faith that you're going to not have open guys underneath. But I do have some belief that some of these opposing quarterbacks will miss some of those guys underneath, especially if you're a little bit healthier. Maybe you get a little bit better pressure on them, which, by the way, FSU, their sack rate is high. Their pressure rate is bad, relatively. I mean, they're 93rd in the country in pressure rate and 14th in sack rate. So they seem to get guys down. I know Knowles missed last game, and that caused a touchdown, but they
It's an
normally
interesting split there.
But it's a concerning split, right? Like I'd rather have it be, hey, a lot of pressure, haven't got the sacks yet, sacks will come. Is the pressure going to come? Like sacks don't create pressure. Pressure creates sacks. So we'll see. I mean, but I'm somewhat optimistic that this defense can improve down the stretch just from pure health.
And you don't have too many other people on your interior that can make it 2nd and 12. I mean, Cooper is not that he's ever going to be like a disruptive force on the inside, but haven't really gotten the level of production that you have out of him. Lovett's just, go back and watch the LSU game if you ever have any doubt as to the level of play and importance of Fabian Lovett. And in many ways, it's stupid that you had to have that guy out on the field and get him injured in the manner they did, but whatever. That's, water under the bridge at this point. So, want to thank our friends at Congruity. I haven't gotten the green light on this, but I do know that they have 2 new additions that we're looking forward to announcing here. Matt Lewis is a fantastic guy to work with, as even more of our listeners are learning, and I can't recommend him highly enough. Congruity HR is the website, and as I say frequently, if you would prefer a third-party introduction, please feel free to email the Nolecast or reach out to me on Twitter, direct message, however it may be, that you can grab me, and more than willing to put you in touch with Matt. So congruityhr.com, whether it be payroll, HR, however it is that your business can be run in a more optimized fashion, Matt Lewis is the guy to help you do that. So a big thank you to them as always.
So I don't know if we're going to have another show this week. Should we discuss some of these opponents coming up?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I've seen pretty much every snap Georgia Tech's taken this year, so can speak on them decently well. And Miami is Miami, and we can rattle off the other 3 teams. But yeah, Georgia Tech plays Thursday night. If you're not otherwise familiar, against UVA, great way for the ACC to put their best product out there on a national game. I may actually try to get down to that and see that. But look, it's a team that I think will win tomorrow night, and that'll be a nice little turnabout for them since they let their coach go with wins over Pitt, Duke, and potentially Virginia. Jeff Sims is Very interesting, man. And this has been the case pretty much all year. If you watch him throw the ball 10 times, there will be 6 throws that you question whether or not the guy can play the position at this level. There will be 1 or 2 throws that are kind of there, and 1 or 2 throws that are, and by there, I mean, just kind of average run of the mill plays, and 1 or 2 throws that will just absolutely impress you. He is very streaky, very hit or miss. Um, Maybe not as fluid and explosive an athlete as you would have projected out of high school. I'm not knocking him. The guy's a nice athlete, but has never really embraced being a runner at maybe the manner that Georgia Tech fans thought he would be able to. Um, they do some interesting things in the run game, but overall, they struggle to protect him in a significant manner. And if this defensive line is at all what we think it can be with a week and a half rest and Fabian Lovett returning, then you should see it pretty early. Now, obviously, Georgia Tech's gonna have a little bit of an extra rest playing tomorrow or playing Thursday night. Um, so that'll be interesting to see those teams match up. But in many ways, I think this week 1 game will give you a pretty good idea as to as to what the next 5 looks like. Obviously, if it goes south, then we all need to have uh, conversations that we don't want to have. But Georgia Tech is a decent opponent, has a little bit of wind in its sails, but an opponent that Florida State should beat by close to 2 scores, in my opinion.
I agree with you there. Georgia Tech to me looks like a team that has a pretty strong run game, especially because they do run Sims a lot. I mean, he went for 95 against Duke, looking for the Georgia Tech Pitt game. He went for 81 against Pitt, and that's with Pitt having 11 tackles for loss and 4 sacks. Georgia Tech has a poor run defense. Now, part of that is because they've played a really good set of run games. They've played Clemson, Ole Miss, UCF, Pitt. I'm sure there's an option team in there that I just missed, but I do think they can be had in the run game. Their pass defense is not that bad. But their pass offense is generally pretty inefficient, as you said. So, look, I think this is a team that you can play and say, hey, can you hit all these underneath passes on us enough? We think we can score 30. Can you score 30? Now, they put up 23 on Duke in overtime. Duke's not a very good defense or a decent offense. They put up 26 on Pitt, but on 338 yards. That was a turnover-fueled thing. It was not really Georgia Tech being the better team. They were under 5 yards per play. I mean, they were 5.6 against Duke. I don't think this offense is very good. I mean, if you get torched by this Georgia Tech offense, like the defensive staff should just walk to their cars, like they like not even go back in the building.
Yep.
That's just kind of how this breaks down. Now, Georgia Tech's defense is kind of feisty, so especially since they fired Collins and put Brent Key in there, you'll need to create some explosives against these guys, stay ahead of the chains with the run game, that type of thing. But this is definitely your most winnable game left on the season, and I think you will be favored by double digits there, depending on what happens on Thursday night when they play UVA. Keep in mind, UVA is horrendous offensively. I mean, just terrible.
Georgia Tech's more winnable than Louisiana, in your opinion?
Kinda.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, like Louisiana looked better. They went on the road and beat Marshall. The Woolridge kid playing for them is not that bad, but I still think physically they're not on the same level as the Noles are. So they're kind of in the same ballpark. Like it'll probably be within a touchdown.
Mm-hmm.
If I had to guess.
Interesting. Okay. So this kind of lends itself, and we're not getting away from the opponent preview. In fact, we're very much staying with it. But while we're doing this, we need to have a realistic conversation as to expectations. And I think, like, I talked to 2 people about this today that are just purely college football data people. They're not Knowles or Canes or whatever else. Both of them told me that 2 and 3s is statistically likely as 5 and 0. Very, very similar probabilities on that. So if you're basing this on Florida State going 5 and 0, well, that's fine. You can cheer and do whatever the hell you want to as a fan. Who am I to tell you how to behave, act, or believe? But I think you just need to be aware as to the likelihood of that, and that perhaps you're setting yourself up for disappointment.
And
Even 4-1. I know.
I think like 5-0 is just as likely as 1-4,
Okay.
not 2-3.
Okay. Well, that's yeah. Even more to the point that I'm trying to poke you with.
Like one and like one like one and one like going over seems really unlikely. Like that's probably 100-1 shot. 1-4 and 5-0 are kind of equally likely to me.
Okay. Yep. All right. Well,
Because
then
either you
same
go
thing.
the wrong way or you go really, really right or really, really wrong. Like if you're gonna go 5-0, you need to make some serious strides over this bye week. Otherwise, you go the wrong way, like all these games are certainly losable. Like you're not going to be 20-something point favorites in these.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going the wrong way, I mean.
Yep. So 4-1. That is and personally, I'd love to see you get to 8 wins. Obviously, I mean that's understood. I'd love to see you get to 9 wins. Hell, I'd love to see you 9 in a bowl game. That's awesome. That's tough. That is a tough place and a tough expectation to have. Now, do you have a roster to do it? Could you get a couple favorable flips of the coin? Absolutely. But again, if that's your 4-1 or bust, then that could be a tough 5-game stretch for you here. So you have, in my opinion, you have to obviously have to get bowl game eligible. Not even really going to entertain that conversation. You need to win 3 games here at a minimum, and you are at a point. And Bud and I have had differing opinions on the importance of these things over the years, but if there is any place in the college football world where winning a bowl game matters, it is when you're in this type of place as a coach and this type of place as a program. If you go 3-2 and you win the bowl game, I ain't going to tell you that everything's great and that there's not going to be some disappointing instant reaction podcasts that we'll have after 2 regular season losses here. But that is a place that you can build and sell both internally to boosters and externally to recruits and potential targets in the portal that will give you a little bit of extra cachet as far as winning a bowl game. Now, do bowl games matter from your perspective, Bud, and projecting year over year and evaluating rosters? No, they don't. But do they matter at this point in a program's trajectory and for a head coach that's trying to grab every ounce of footing in his proverbial climb? Hell yeah, they do. And this is one of the rare places in time where they absolutely matter for this program.
We actually talked about this on the phone the other day. I thought it was a great point you brought up, right? So to me, like I strip bowl games out of my year-to-year projections because I don't think they matter in terms of like telling how good a team is or is not. But they matter to donors. They can probably matter to your like internal program momentum in terms of the buy-in and belief. Because if you were to make a bowl game at 7-5 and then lose it, and you finish 7-6, that's not real impressive. Now, they don't matter for recruiting because of when they fall on the calendar now. I really don't think they do. Like, unless you're beating some really big name opponent. For instance, all these South Carolina fans were telling me in the offseason that how good they were because they whipped North Carolina in the bowl game. Well, guess what? If they played tomorrow, North Carolina would be favored over South Carolina, and it wouldn't be by a super small margin, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So, but
Do they matter in recruiting as far as like a
I think
kid
they sold that stuff.
deciding to go to your school in 3 weeks from now? No, they don't. You're right. The calendar's changed. Kids' decision is sped up. It's a whole different process. Do they matter in recruiting? That old Jimbo in South Georgia is still fully behind you and willing to help you do the things that are necessary in recruiting. That's the place where I believe they matter in recruiting right now.
Totally. I can agree with that. The first thing this team needs to do is make a bowl game. Man, if they could make it to a bowl by the Miami game, that would be just fantastic for these guys. Now we'll see, right? Miami has a pretty good defensive line. They just held North Carolina to 35 points, which is pretty hard to do. And I don't know how well you'll block them down there. They also are probably getting Restrepo and George back by the time you roll in to play them. And that's November 5th. That's 4 weeks away now, or 3 weeks away, excuse me. But they are beatable, I think, if you play well. You're going to have to play well, though. Like Miami, I don't think you're a better team than Miami is. You're going to need your A game to beat them. They have some deficiencies. but they should be getting healthier, just as FSU, are getting healthier. I agree, though. You have to make a bowl game. If you don't, then, let's go back to the question we asked on signing day. Are we just playing out the string?
Yeah. Yeah. If you don't make a bowl game, then that means you're going 1-4. And yeah, at that point, the string has all been played out, in my opinion. I certainly don't think that's going to happen. I think Florida State wins 3 at a minimum, but it may be maybe a little bit of a bumpier ride than some would like in these final 5 games.
I think it's it's probably like an 80% chance, maybe higher, that they're somewhere between 2-3 and 4-2 down the stretch.
Mm-hmm.
So all of those outcomes are bowl game. I think the odds that you don't go to a bowl game are like 5%. We'll see about Florida, right? Like some of these teams, man, I'm having a hard time projecting. What the hell do you make of Florida?
Yeah.
LSU
struggled
LSU
all year to figure out what Florida is.
LSU scored touchdowns, I think, on its first 7 drives of the game. And none of them were short fields. They were just like between 60 and 85 yards each time. It was it was incredible. Like we saw that LSU team, and it wasn't just FSU. Like Auburn made them look terrible, and Tennessee did. So who knows what's going on at Florida? I'm a little bit skeptical of Syracuse, to be honest. Now, I was buying on Syracuse. I actually took Syracuse last week for the show and whatnot, because I don't think people correctly figured out just how big of a downgrade it was to play that quarterback that's not named Devin Leary. But they got a whole lot of flags to beat Purdue. I looked on DraftKings, their look ahead line. They're actually a home underdog to Notre Dame, which just lost at home to Stanford. A lot of the advanced numbers don't think Syracuse is all that good, especially if you have to look at them and say, wait a second. Okay. Purdue was really banged up when they went and played them. Purdue was probably the right side there, and Syracuse won. They got to play NC State. Now, they moved the ball in NC State successfully, but I also think NC State was playing a little more aggressive than they do at times because they knew that their offense couldn't score. Virginia kind of gave them a game. Syracuse's run defense is pretty poor, so I'm a little thinking that maybe Syracuse could be had here. I'm not saying if it should be favored in the game, but they're not going to be huge underdogs, barring a lot of unforeseen injuries. Knock on wood. There's just a lot we don't know. But I don't think any of these teams that you're playing are a lot better than you. There's some chance that maybe 3 of the 5 are better than you are, but not by a ton, right? Like the possible ranges here are like FSU's a good bit better, FSU's a little bit better, they're about the same, FSU is, somewhat worse. I don't think any of these teams, maybe if Miami wakes up, like Mallory, or not Mallory, but TVD was playing better the last 2 weeks than he's been playing. I guess there's some chance Miami, if they get these guys back, all of a sudden are much better, but I'm still skeptical.
Yep. Charlie Park is a group that we've never had to been skeptical about. In fact, I've always been wildly fortunate to enjoy the support of Matt Thompson and the whole For the Table restaurant group. Charlie Park is Tallahassee's best rooftop bar and a place that Bud and I have loved since the day it opened its doors. So whether it be Friday nights, going up there, grabbing cocktails, overlooking Cascade Park for their incredible grazing brunch that they put out on Sunday morning. It is a fantastic place filled with we all have our own drink that we go to and judge a bar by, or certain list of liqueur. And when I walked in the door and saw what their Scotch list looked like, I knew I was in the right place, and I would highly recommend that you guys try them out. And when you do try them out, I also recommend a reservation. So go to their website, take a look at that. Some great pictures and drone footage as well, and make a reservation, whether it be for cocktails, some of the food options that they have up there, or it be the brunch that I referenced earlier. So big thank you to them. And as always, thank you to Matt Thompson and his broader team at For the Table Restaurant Group.
Absolutely. All right. So where else do you want to take this thing tonight? I kind of want to, I know we've been kind of negative tonight at times, but these are just things that are recurring issues this year that I feel like, even relative to your talent level, could be better. I will note that if you look at the SP Plus or FPI, FSU's in the top 40. And in the preseason, we discussed this, right? You want to be a top 40 level team, hopefully higher, but that's at least a little starting point. And given some of the injuries you've had, we can say they're unlucky to be 4-3, but also like I think you're pretty lucky that your backup quarterback came in and beat Louisville on the road with all the other injuries we just described. They're definitely improving, man.
I think, Bud, if we were to go back to Chica and you and I were to have a cocktail, and I were to tell you that Florida State loses two offensive linemen, potential starters, before it ever plays a competitive snap, and I know you lost one of them in the Duquesne game, but you know what I'm saying, y'all.
Competitive snap. You
If
said it
I
right.
tell you that you're going to get the level of play from Duke Cooper that you have, if I would tell you that you wouldn't have Fabian for pretty much the entirety of the year post the LSU game. Um, Look, I'm not trying to blow sunshine up anybody's rear end here, but to an extent, 4-3 is also a testament as to the job done and the overall improvement of the program when you look at the level of injuries that this team has had and the injuries sustained to its most impactful players. Honestly, Verse and Lovett may be your two best players on the roster. Lovett, you haven't had, like I said, for since the last series of the LSU game. And Verse, when you have had him, has been a guy that's both nursing an injury and also trying to mentally trust his leg and body again. You should be 5-2. That sucks. I'm not going to sugarcoat that. The NC State game is going to stay with us for the entirety of the season, but you also have shown a significant. Look, again, I'm not trying to say everything's great, but 4-3 is a pretty impressive mark when you consider some of the hurdles and hills that this team's had to come.
Yeah, they've overcome some challenges. They could be better. They could be worse. I mean, this is. I don't think 4-3 is a really accurate represent, or I don't think it's misleading for how you've played and what you've had happen to you. So, we'll see how the second half of the season goes. Definitely your chance for the best season you've had in over half decade, and I think most people are still pretty encouraged by what they're seeing. The sequencing, we talked about sequencing a lot prior, a couple years ago. The sequencing of the wins here matters, right? If you had lost Louisville and then you beat NC State to where you don't have any back-to-back losses, are you actually any better? No. Are you? You see what I'm saying here?
Mhm.
Like it's just, but mentally, people are like, oh, 3 in a row, things are getting worse. No, you just happen to play the 3 best teams you're going to play all year, I think, at the same time. Now, postseason, Syracuse will be rated higher, I think, than NC State because NC State, I'm just not sure they can score. But you guys get my point. Back when they had the quarterback, they're certainly, I think, they're better than Cuse with the QB. So it's not that bad of a team, man. Let's just enjoy the rest of the season and see what comes of it.
See what comes of it, and just beg, bar, steal, get to 8. That's what it is, and I'll even allow a bowl game at this point. Get to 8, be the do well enough. Obviously, high school recruiting matters to an extent. Some of that book's already written. Do well enough that you can continue to market yourself as one of the premier portal destinations. And I don't know that you're going to win like the 5-star tackles or whatever. I mean, that's still a tough place for Florida State to conduct itself.
Did you
But
see how Mims has been grading out this year, by the way?
has I
Great.
wasn't aware he had gotten too many grades. Has he been getting more snaps than when I
Yeah,
last
he's
looked in?
played like 150 snaps. They're rotating him in a good bit.
Okay, good for him.
He actually saw one of the guys today on Cover 3 in the comment section. He's a big Georgia fan. He's like, "Hey, don't be surprised if Mims actually takes over the starting job." I was like,
Well,
"Oh, okay, well, yeah." If you want to feel even worse about how that went down,
well, look, get 8 wins, and I don't know that you're going to get the Mims equivalency in this year's portal, but be a attractive enough option to throw your hat in the ring, and 8 would certainly go a long way in doing that. Is there anything else that you want to talk about, or are we at the point where we can thank our friends and review our prize picks from the weekend before, and maybe if any early things have jumped off to us?
yeah, man, let's go ahead and do that.
I'll tell you what, bud, and this is just maybe this is me just being a wanker, but I will tell you the benefits of having Prize Picks as a sponsor is that we get to do fun conversations like this. But when I opened up the door and it was 42 degrees, the Prize Pick quarter zip was just perfect for me today. So that was great. Great to get a little swag bag from those guys, and thank you to all of you who have supported us in our partnership with them.
What did we have last week? I know we had a couple wins. You had a pretty good week, right?
I did. I played it pretty slow last week. Actually,
Okay.
I think the suggested ones we went through into, so not our best performance. Um,
We did well on the FSU ones, right?
we did the FSU ones. I think we talked. Well, the Clemson kicker, Jordan's fantasy. Um, I think
Wilson.
Wilson, and I think did we suggest? I did a Clemson podcast too where I suggested this, but I think we suggested the ship running and receiving yard. That was like
Yeah, that,
84.
that was that, that was Nolecast.
His running number was 75 and his running and receiving was like 84 and a half. So you could it just that made sense to me, and I didn't realize that kid was going to quite pop like he did. But yeah, so the game suggestions went well. I will tell you that I've fallen into this, like, if I can't bet my whole stash on Friday night games and then recycle it, I'm disappointed or something. And I think there was only one game last Friday night, so honestly, y'all, I filed one ticket. Also, selfishly, I had like the best weekend I'm ever going to have the weekend before, and I just knew that I wasn't going to go 11 for 11 again or whatever. So I was a little bit slow, but I'll jump back in head first this weekend.
Stay tuned to the Twitter. We'll have some picks for this weekend. Are the lines even up for the weekend games yet?
There were a couple out there. The one thing I
Okay.
will say from a Florida State perspective, y'all, I think the days of you getting Jordan fantasy starting or ending with a number that has teen in it is probably gone. I will be surprised as to what those numbers look like. But if he's going to continue to give you, 50 yards and a rushing touchdown, they are going to revisit where they set those numbers. And for the most part, it's been somewhere between 16 and 19. And I'd be surprised if you see that again.
Yeah, I think I probably would as well. Friday night or Thursday night stuff. Mm, I don't I don't really have picks yet this week. It's supposed to pour in that UCLA Oregon game, by the way. Like, just terrible weather. So we'll
Hmm.
see. Um, I'd probably go under on Quinshad Junkins for Ole Miss.
Okay.
The freshman running back got him at 100 rushing yards. I mean, look, I think he's a really good player actually, but at the same time, it kind of makes me wonder: does LSU key on him more? Do they make somebody else, have to win for you there? We'll see.
Yeah. I don't know that there's really a whole lot. I was just looking at the Georgia Tech, Virginia numbers. There's nothing that jumps out to me there, y'all. If there is, we'll put it on the Twitter account. But yeah, I love a good two shots at it, and maybe a Thursday Friday grouping, and then get back Saturday morning and try to put some. Now I always try to play a ticket if I am going to be heavily participating, like the Ewers fantasy numbers the past couple weekends. As soon as I see those, I try to jump on them because I thought they would move a little bit. But for the most part, you can still find some interesting plays on Saturday morning. And as always, Nolecast is the coupon code for your 100% initial deposit match back. And if only I could have as much fun with Prize Picks as as all experiences in the sporting arena. But this has been a great time. So.
Awesome, buddy. Let me see here. Probably Patreon show Monday, and we'll figure something out there.
Yep. Yeah, I look forward to that, and we'll have a full game preview as well, obviously, of the Georgia Tech game. And hey, look, this is going to be a lot of fun. I mean, cards are going to be out on the table. We're going to find out a whole hell of a lot about this program, coaching staff, and general trajectory over the next 5 games. And I look forward to it. Now, we had a very sober conversation at parts of this tonight, but you've got a team that can go out there and perform well, and it'll just be fun to see how this plays out. And as I said, I think the Georgia Tech game will be pretty damn instructive as to what the back half of the season looks like.
I think we'll also go and check the uh, maybe
Snap.
on Monday or Tuesday. We'll take a look at snap count draft,
Yep.
just see where we stand on that. Should be some really interesting results there, and then also check and see what these future FSU opponents did before we knock out the preview. So looking
I
forward
think
to
we
that.
monopolized all of that in Georgia Tech conversation tonight. Although we did talk about
I,
Miami and Florida as well, but such is life. All right, y'all. We've rambled here in the final 2 minutes, but thank you as always for your support. We'll be back here with you soon. And for now, this has been the latest Nolecast.
See you, buddy.